October the 26th. It is 5:10 a.m., 5:11 a.m. And I want to give you a quick update on the situation on the ground. I'll use the map in order to show you the most recent events regarding Gaza, fighting between Israel and Hamas. And then I'd like to dive into a few issues that really have been troubling us over the last 2.5 weeks. A lot of fake information, a lot of lies, a lot of misinformation coming out of Gaza, and unfortunately a lot of people are believing in it. So what I want to do in this short video is give you examples of how Hamas has been lying, misleading the international media, give you proof of it, to understand how dangerous it is, and show you how careful we all should be when getting information from the Gaza Strip. As always, if you like our content, subscribe, share with your friends on this platform and on different platforms, and in general, stay tuned for the content that we produce. So what happened over the last days? We had quite a significant attempt, despite the fact that Israel now is back in full control over the border. We have repaired the fence that was breached by Hamas 2.5 weeks ago on the morning of October the 7th, when they crossed into Israel, massacred Israeli civilians, more than 1,000 of them. Since then, we've closed the border here, but last night, or a little bit more than 24 hours ago, we had quite a special and spectacular attack. This one, unlike previous attacks, wasn't on the ground. Here, terrorists exited from somewhere in this area here, and then used special diving equipment that they've been able to obtain, made their way via the sea, and eventually landed close to this Israeli community here. I'm zooming in on a place called Zikim, another kibbutz. The kibbutz was attacked on the 7th of October. They were able to defend themselves on the day of the attack, and none of the terrorists got in then. The terrorists obviously are trying to do that again, and they ascended via the beach, but were thwarted or stopped by Israeli Navy forces. This goes to show that the Hamas terrorists continue to pose a threat for Israeli civilians, that we have to remain on guard and be vigilant. Luckily, the Israeli Navy and ground forces were able to successfully thwart that attack. No Israeli civilians were wounded. Other important events are that for the first time we are going to open up another Israeli community. You can see it here in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. You see this little community here? In Hebrew it's called Cholit. And tomorrow the international media is going to go down there into this small community, which is really on the verge of the southern part of the border between Israel on this side here, Egypt on this side, and the Gaza Strip here. You can see Cholit. They were under a horrible attack on October the 7th. Terrorists were able to get in, massacred civilians. There are hostages from this vicinity and from villages close by. And for the first time, international media are going to get access to this place after the bodies of Israelis have been taken for burial and all of the other clearing processes have been made. That's going to happen tomorrow. So if you're interested, you should follow media outlets, and perhaps you'll see it, what they report. Another thing that we did with the media was actually to show some extremely graphic and sensitive content. Now this is videos that was covered from security cameras in cars. This is from a car. You can see a terrorist executing an Israeli civilian. You can see the cartridges flying. He's just pumping bullets into another Israeli, and here he is abducting. This was from footage from security camera. This is at an entrance to a kibbutz. You see the terrorist killing Israeli civilians in their vehicle. The vehicle loses control, and this is how the terrorists get into one of those Israeli kibbutzim, one of those communities. We showed international media this footage and some really gruesome stuff, not because we enjoy it, and not because we are proud of it. We are very sad to have to show this to the world, these types of atrocities, Israeli civilians getting butchered. Do you know why we showed it? Because we want people around the world to understand what kind of evil it is we're fighting. Only when you see the pictures of the barbarism here, terrorists going back and forth, dragging out corpses, and there's even worse things of mutilations and burning bodies and rape and beheadings and things that it's difficult to imagine even, and it hurts to speak about it. Only when you see that and when we're able to show that to the international media, can they perhaps show the world and educate people around the world who may not know what it is we're facing. Why is this important? Why is this important? Because this is the evil that we face. This is what we need to prevent in the future. This is what we need to stop from happening, and I'm going to spare you the rest of it. If you want to see the video, you can see it on our YouTube page, and the link will probably be in the descriptions. It's very graphic, not recommended for sensitive people or younger people, but anybody who wants to understand the evil that we face and wants to understand why we are responding as strongly and as committedly as we are, that's the reason why. Because all of these communities around the Gaza Strip, all of these quiet, beautiful and peaceful communities, they cannot live knowing that this threat exists in Gaza. That's why we have to make sure to eradicate, to completely dismantle Hamas and all of the other terrorists inside the Gaza Strip, because if they are allowed to exist here, our people will never feel safe. And that's something that is our job to prevent, and that is what we're doing now. That's what the war in Gaza is about. We're fighting Hamas, we're not fighting the civilians, and we're focusing on their military capabilities. We've been striking all over the Gaza Strip, focusing mostly on the northern part, after having asked civilians to evacuate, for them to move south from Gaza City towards the southern area of the Gaza Strip. But we're striking Hamas targets all over the Gaza Strip, wherever there's a Hamas commander, wherever there's a serious person, a senior person in Hamas, we strike them, we strike their military infrastructure, and we try to do as much as possible from the air before the next stage of operations. Now, I want to show you something, a few things, because you may hear a lot of information coming out of the Gaza Strip. You may hear that Gaza is running out of fuel. There's been lots of things said about fuel. And I'd like to show you something that we saw a few days ago. Actually, it was more than a week ago, which indicated that this headline, okay? UN body warns that they only have 24 hours of fuel to run the hospitals because, again, obviously, of Israel's fault. Now, something interesting is actually the date. And if we zoom in and look at the date, here in the lower corner, you can see that it's October 17th. We're October 26th today. I think 24 hours have passed, yet the hospitals continue to run. So might this have been a premature alarm bell? Somebody crying wolf before the situation really became serious? Question. Now, we also see other headlines which are similar, again based on UN agencies and based on other sources of information, which were, this one is quite recent, from a day ago, and again the same warning, and it's all about the fuel. Let's speak a little bit about the fuel. I don't know if you know, but inside the Gaza Strip there are quite a lot of containers of fuel, to store fuel. And this is a tweet that we tweeted a day and a half ago. A zoom in on a few of the different fuel containers that exist inside the Gaza Strip. Now, they're not controlled by us, they're not controlled by the Egyptians, they're controlled by the organization that governs the Gaza Strip. That's Hamas. They have control over fuel. Now, for some reason, UN organizations and humanitarians who are most likely operating out of their goodwill and they want to do good for the civilians there, they're asking us and the world for fuel. But they shouldn't be doing that. They should be asking those who govern the Gaza Strip, which is Hamas. Hamas has fuel, but it's only the priorities of Hamas that are different. Hamas, their priorities are to use the fuel for fighting against Israel, to provide ventilation and air for their tunnel system, to fire rockets at Israel, to have their command and control, and for the families of close and senior Hamas members to have air conditioning and electricity in their houses, but for the rest of Gazans, not so much. For hospitals, not so much. And I think that is a serious issue that is being overlooked by the international community. Yes, the situation in Gaza isn't pleasant. Yes, there are casualties, and we'll speak about numbers in a second. And yes, there is a shortage of many things. All of that is the responsibility of Hamas. They have fuel, they have ability to generate water, they have food, and they have medicine. It's just where they put this that is really the issue. And the priority of Hamas is to use it for themselves in order to fight against Israel, and it's not to provide the humanitarian aid to the humans that need it, which is sad. Now, let's speak a little bit about numbers and casualties, because this already is a frequent issue, a very important issue, and it's going to become even more important. Let's look at this update, okay? This is the number claimed by the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. And why do I say Hamas-run? Because it is run and authorized by Hamas, and it works out of Gaza. Many news outlets, some less respectable than others, still use these sources as a verified official source. Now, if you go into a bit more detail, you'll see that there's lots of emphasis on civilians, but what you don't find is how many the age group of men from the age of 17 to 35. I haven't seen any reference to that, and I know that there are Hamas combatants, fighters, terrorists that are fighting against us that we have been able to kill from the air, but they're not mentioned. It's only about women, children, elderly, and anything but combatants. And that's simply misleading the world and lying. And the sad thing is that they're getting away with it. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that civilians aren't dying in Gaza. I understand, and that is sad, and that is not our purpose. We're fighting against Hamas. We're not fighting against the population in Gaza. But it is untrue and unfair and incorrect to listen and to take the information from the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry at face value, because they have an interest in inflating the numbers of civilians and women and children and elderly killed and making the numbers of Hamas combatants disappear. We're going to hold their feet to the fire and publish our information of the amount of Hamas combatants that have been killed for the world to see that this isn't only a story about civilians getting killed, it's first and foremost about us fighting against Hamas. Let's speak a little bit more about credibility when we speak about casualties. Remember this headline? Hundreds of people were killed in the BBC. There was, of course, the New York Times headlines as well. They even went as far as to actually quote the numbers that Hamas said, 500. Since then, I haven't seen any proof of 500 people killed in that parking lot. And I've seen lots of proof and visual investigations confirming that it was a rocket fired by Palestinians that landed in the parking lot, probably caused casualties there and people were killed, but I haven't seen an official verified independent number, and I don't know how many were killed. I'm sure that people were killed, and that is sad. Not Israel's fault. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad's fault. But I ask, why aren't questions being asked of Hamas and the so-called health authority in Gaza? Why don't we ask them how many people were actually killed? You claim that Israel was to blame for the attack. That has been proven false, debunked. And you claim that 500 people were killed, which is part of the tally, the number that I showed just before. Where are those 500 people? Who verified that? Because every life does matter, and we don't want to see civilians killed, and we care if civilians are killed, then let's be accurate about the numbers. And the Palestinians are not, and that is really a sad thing. And that's unfortunately not only me thinking. I think that President Biden has already been informed by his staff, by seeing the reality on the ground, and he understands that the numbers coming out of the Hamas-controlled authorities in Gaza are not reliable. And I think that's sad, and it does a disservice to the Palestinians in Gaza that have been suffering of almost 20 years of Hamas oppression. And that's a very sad story. I'll go back to the map to wrap up this briefing, and let's speak about the current situation and where things may go from here. So I spoke about the attacks. Rockets are still being fired at Israel, at major cities in southern Israel, both Ashdod and towards Rishon LeZion and many other communities here in the south. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Israelis had to go to shelters, run to shelters because of the rockets. But thankfully, the Iron Dome intercepted the rockets, and everybody are more or less safe. The situation in the south continues to be tense, and we are deployed all along the Gaza Strip with ground forces ready and prepared to take our operation to the next stage. When that will come, you'll see. But we are ready, and we are going to strike Hamas in such a way that they won't have any other option but either to die or to surrender. We also understand that it's going to be a long war, and it's not going to be easy, and it's clear for all of us. But we are very committed to going in, taking care of Hamas, and again I go back to the most important part. These communities need to be able to live in safety within their sovereign and defended borders, knowing that there are no monsters on the other side of that border that will try to perform the same atrocities that Hamas did on Saturday, the 7th of October, when more than 1,000 Israeli civilians were massacred and more than 222 were taken hostage into Gaza. That is what this conflict is about, nothing else. We didn't start this war, Hamas did. We didn't start it, but we're going to end it. If you like this content and if you find it useful, share it. You can comment, you can ask us questions for future briefings. We try to listen and produce content according to what people ask. This was a specific briefing that we did according to what we see that our viewers and followers have been complaining about, the fake information coming out of Hamas-controlled Gaza. If you have suggestions, write it, share, and we will do our best to listen. Until next time, Shalom.